Hi, welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, hi, my name is Oline and I'm a knitter from Norway and I have a huge yarn stash. I wouldn't really say it's gotten out of hand yet, but I also never want to get to that point, so I've decided that moving forwards I'm going to focus a little bit more on my yarn stash, and I think I'm going to make a series of focusing on my yarn stash and everything I'm doing to kind of rail my yarn stash in, and I thought the perfect start to a series like that would be to give an update on my yarn stash. I did go through my whole yarn stash, cataloging everything, going through every single skein and weighing that, I think exactly 6 months ago now. In January, I like to start my year off by going through it in great detail and then sorting it out again. Now it hasn't really been sorted through in 6 months, but I wanted to give an update as to where we are. I'm not going to sort through it again today because it takes forever to sort through it, but I wanted to give an update, kind of go through the numbers and see where we are so we know where we're starting before we go on this kind of stash busting journey, or at least being more aware of what's in my stash and knitting from that first before going to other projects. So 6 months ago, when I went through my yarn stash, my whole yarn stash weighed 29,454 grams, which already was a lot, but now 6 months later my yarn stash weighs in at a whopping 41,935 grams of yarn, which feels like an insane number. I don't feel it's that long since I had a yarn stash at like under 10 kilos and now I'm at over 40, so definitely it's starting to feel insane and we're reining it in. With my yarn stash having grown that much since January, I also want to say that I've also at the same time knit 12,113 grams of yarn. So even with me having knit that much, it's still grown that much. So I think this series about kind of stash busting and growing awareness for my stash is really needed. So for the rest of the year, I've tried to make a plan, or this yarn stash is probably going to take me more than a year, but I've tried to plan in like maybe 6 months increments, but at least for the rest of the year my plan is to definitely do a low buy for the rest of the year. I would say no buy, but I have 3 projects that I have had planned for quite some time that I don't have the yarn for, so those 3 very specific projects I'm allowed to get yarn for, and really no other projects. And then also I'm allowed to get yarn if I lose yarn chicken, which I've been losing yarn chicken a lot lately, so I need that rule there. So it won't be a no buy, but definitely very limited. The 3 projects I'm allowed to get yarn for, if you want to hold me accountable, is the Aftenstrikk blanket, like a full-size blanket. I have been wanting that for really long and I've said I'm allowed to get it this year. And then I also want I'm going to knit a Marus for me and my husband so we can match the one I knit for my son this Easter. So those 3 projects are a done deal, but only those 3, no other. And also yarn if I lose yarn chicken. Other than that, I'm not going to buy any more yarn. Fingers crossed, I shouldn't need it. And then of course if I get gifted yarn or inherit yarn, that's okay. That's also a lot of my yarn stash is grown because I've been gifted or inherited yarn, and I'm not going to say no to inherited or gifted yarn, even though my yarn stash is quite big, just because I don't want yarn to go to waste. And I know even with my big yarn stash, like almost all of my yarn has a plan, and I'm pretty sure I'll be able to get to all of it at some point, just it's going to take me longer and longer the more my stash grows. So that's the like most important plan for the year, to not keep adding to my yarn stash all of the time. And then I also need to go through my yarn stash in more detail and see if I want to destash some. I am pretty sure that I only have yarn in my stash that I really love and that I want to use, but I'm going to go through it again and see, like really see through it, and if there's yarn I think I'll never get to or that I'm always putting off, that's going to get gifted, give it to the next person. And I'm also going to go through all of my scrap yarn, because since I do knit so much, it also generates a lot of scrap yarn, and I'm not the best at sitting down and going through my scrap yarn and see what I could make with those. So I'm also planning on dedicating a whole month in the coming 6 months, the end of the year, to just doing scrap yarn projects, going through all of my scrap yarn, figuring out projects, and then dedicate a month to go to knitting those scrap projects. I think that's going to be really fun. It's also really motivating to knit with scrap yarn, because the projects are often tiny and you can really make a dent in all of your scrap yarn. So that's definitely something I'm going to do. And then another really important thing is that I'm going to be sticking to my plans, both these plans when it comes to stash busting, but also my knitting plans. If I say to myself that I'm going to knit this and that with that yarn, I'm actually going to do it. I'm going to try to knit things in the order I've kind of imagined, just to make it a bit easier to stay on top of things. Of course, knitting is still a hobby, so I'm trying to not be too strict, because that will take away the joy and it will take me way longer to get through this stash if I lose my knitting mojo. So it's a balance, but I really want to stick to my plans and not be wishy-washy and flip-flop back and forth about what I want to use my yarn for. I am pretty good at that, but I do very often let other projects sneak ahead in lines. I'm going to try to not do that as much, because I tend to forget about the yarn in my stash that was like next in line when I do that. So I'm going to try to be better at sticking to plans while still leaving room for just like creative flow and trying to not lose my knitting mojo. And then I have some plans for some of the yarn that will do a lot to my yarn stash, because I think 1/5 of my yarn stash right now is yarn for Christmas gifts. I did kind of recently buy a lot of drops Nepal, because I'm knitting felted slippers for kind of everyone we know for Christmas this year, and that is like literally 1/5 of my stash. So just getting through the slippers, getting through all of the Christmas gifts will do a lot in terms of making my stash smaller. That slipper yarn isn't even in here and I still have this much yarn, but it will do a lot to the numbers. It will get me, I think it will get me to under 35 kilos of yarn. And then I've recently gotten into crochet again. I've been loving crochet, and one really great thing about crochet is that it does eat a lot of yarn. And I also have some yarn, like more summery yarn, cotton yarn, that I don't knit that much with. So I think having gotten back into crochet will be perfect to get that yarn out of my stash. And it's also been really fun to do like different crafts, so I think doing a lot of crochet will also be helping me. And then third on the list when it comes to these plans is that I need to figure out what to do with my alpaca yarn. I have quite a lot of fingering weight, 100% alpaca yarn, and I'm struggling to figure out what to do with that, because it is quite, it has very many loose hairs, so it's not the best for baby knits necessarily, and I don't always love the way fingering weight alpaca looks, because the stitches lose a lot of their definition. So I need to figure out if I want to destash that, if I find a really great project to use them for, if I want to maybe knit a blanket with them. I need to do more brainstorming when it comes to that, but I think the fingering weight alpaca in different yarn brands also is maybe like 2 or 3 kilos of my yarn stash that I have no clue what to do with. So that's also really high up on the priority list to figure out what to do with that. But those are like the plans and kind of rules I've set for myself and things I've kind of started thinking about to help myself get through this process of I won't say I'm necessarily wanting to get through my yarn stash, but get it down to a more like normal level, get it down to a level where I'm not afraid that it's going to get out of hand. But yeah, those are my plans so far and what I'm going to do so far. Feel free to chip in if you think I should add any rules or plans, or what you think I should do going forward with this stash, because I don't really know. I've just been letting it live its own life for a couple of years now, but I think it's time that I start being more mindful with my stash and thinking more about all of my decisions when it comes to my stash, both what I knit from it and what I invite into it. As you can see, I do have a lot of yarn, and there is so much yarn hiding under here as well that you can't really see. And then, of course, all of the slipper yarn and most of my scrap yarn as well isn't even in this room. So there's a lot to get through, but I think it can be a really fun journey to get through all of this yarn. And as I said, I still don't feel like it's gotten out of hand, so I'm still really motivated and I still have only positive emotions when it comes to this yarn stash. But I think it's really important that we do this now before we get to that point where it gets out of hand and it's just stressful to try to do anything about it. But that is the update as to where we are at right now. I'll put like all of the numbers on the screen as to where we were 6 months ago, where we are now, how many grams I have in stash, how many meters I have in stash, and also how many grams and meters I've knit already this year. I've been knitting now for 6 months of this year and we have 6 months left, so I think I should be able to do about the same amount of knitting the last 6 months of the year, but we'll see where we end up. I have tried to set a goal for myself as to where I want to be when the year ends, and I would love to say that I have less yarn in my stash when the year ends than I did when the year started. And as I said, I had how much did I have? I had 29,450 grams when the year started, so getting to 29 kilos, or I would really love if I was able to get down to 28 grams by the end of the year. That would be amazing, but I would have to knit even more than I've done the last 6 months to get there. But that is my goal. We'll see. I might get there if I also do a bit of destashing, if there is some yarn I don't imagine me getting to work with. But yeah, that's where we're at. That's my goal, and some of my plan as to how we're going to get there. So I hope you want to come with me on this journey to figure out my yarn stash. I thought I would do some updates throughout the year or years it will take to get not through my yarn stash, but get it to a better place. I don't know how often I'll do the updates. Maybe every 6 months is good. Please let me know what you would want from this series, how often you would like updates, if I should add any rules. Just give me your opinions. I would love to know. And yeah, that's all I had, and now I'm going to go back to trying to knit out of my yarn stash. I hope you enjoyed this video and want to come along with me on my journey. If you enjoyed this video, please leave a like and a comment. That means the absolute world to me. And if you want to come along with me on this journey, please subscribe. Bye!